Women now make up over 50% of the workforce in the U.S., according to an early 2020 report released by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So, what's driving this push? In part, societal shifts that are reshaping gender norms, family dynamics, and the priorities and opportunities women have. Today, many women juggle several roles, and in many households, it's normal to see both partners holding jobs. It's not uncommon these days for women to earn even more than their male partners. But go back to the late 1980s, and only 18% of wives were the primary breadwinners in a marriage where both partners worked. As of 2018, this number has shot up to 30%. Yet so many women today, despite earning an income, are held back by the notion that the world of finance or investment is a man's game, or an area that their partner can solely manage. This mentality can put women at a disadvantage by keeping them dependent and in the dark when it comes to personal finance.
I think often we have equated being taken care of with being taken care of financially. And what that really means is that you are financially dependent on someone else, and you're leaving your future in their hands.
That's Jennifer Barrett, a financial expert, a top executive at the personal investment app Acorns, and the author of Think Like a Breadwinner. Barrett says too often women fall into the trap of financial complacency.
I spoke to over 100 women for this book, and so many of them told me stories about how they expected their partner to always earn more, and, their partner lost a job, or their partner decided to take a job that was lower paying, or their partner made some big financial mistakes and left them really vulnerable, and suddenly the future that they wanted was at stake. It's so important that we are in a position where we can take care of ourselves and know that we can provide the lives that we want for ourselves, irrespective of whether we're married or not.
Barrett herself was in a tight position several years back. She had no savings, was living in a small apartment with her husband and young child, and eventually reached a breaking point. She wanted more out of life and decided to step up and become more money savvy.
It's still sort of surprising when a woman says, I want to make a lot of money. I say that. I want to make a lot of money. I really do. I'm honest about that because I know what making a lot of money and building my wealth will allow me to do, to provide for my family, to provide the life I want, to support the causes I care about. But I think I'm probably unusual in being so open about that. I think there's still kind of a taboo around talking about money, and it's shifting, but we aren't quite there yet. And what's interesting, and there's a lot of data around this, is that we are, again, socialized as girls to sort of believe that if we work hard and keep our head down, we'll be rewarded. And that is often true in school, so it sort of reinforces that. But then we come into the workplace, and that's just not the case. In the workplace, you really need to advocate for yourself. You need to be checking on a regular basis what your market value is, and you can look at any number of resources. There are Glassdoor, Fairy Godboss. There are tons of resources out there where you can get a sense of what people are getting paid, what the range is for the kind of work you're doing in the area where you live. And when you see those numbers, you want to make sure you're at the top of that range,
And more people are advocating for themselves. The internet has created a massive free database of salary comparisons and resources on how to go about a pay negotiation. Some of the top sites for these income and company rating breakdowns are Glassdoor and PayScale. Barrett says the more you can quantify your value to the business, the better off you are when you have that talk with your boss.
In your job, to be very clear about what it is that you need to accomplish in order to move to the next level, what you're going to be judged on. And as much as you can, quantify the value that you bring to your company so that when you do go in there and you ask for a raise or you go for a promotion, you are walking in there with numbers. You are walking in there with quantifiable evidence of how you have brought value to the company. Whether it's revenue that you've brought in, new customers that you've brought in, customer retention, or, you've had specific metrics that you've been given and how much you've exceeded them. And then also bringing in data on, what other people in your role are getting paid. And if there's a gap between that and the wages that you're earning, bring that to the conversation because it's really hard to argue with numbers. And that also just takes a lot of the emotion out of it. When you can just come in and point to the numbers and say, look, here's the value that I'm bringing. And look, here's what other people doing what I do are making. And there's a gap here. What can we do to close that gap?
But sometimes the paycheck may just not be enough to support the life you want. Barrett says that too often people don't zoom out and take a wider look at how their current title fits into their long-term life goals. Does this field of work pay enough? Can you cut down spending and save more? Or are you forced to live paycheck to paycheck? At the end of the day, if you're not bringing in enough money to cover the basics, it's hard to build savings, prepare for retirement, and invest in stocks to grow your worth. Barrett points out that ideally, each paycheck shouldn't automatically go towards expenses because ultimately it's unsustainable.
Use every paycheck as an opportunity to be less dependent on your next paycheck. And what that means is that you want to take as much money as you can out of every check you get and put that money to work for you. So putting some money into savings, yes, because you want to have some emergency savings set aside in a high-yield savings account so that if, for example, you lose a job, you've got enough to cover expenses for 3 months or more is a good gauge. But outside of that, you really want to be investing for your midterm goals too, not just retirement. And that is so important. I cannot reinforce that enough.
Barrett highlights that so many women still hand over many of these responsibilities to their partner or ignore it altogether. And this lack of financial awareness can have an impact in the workplace as well, leading to stagnant career and income growth.
If you look at the data, women still disproportionately choose the lowest paying occupations, and even in the highest paying fields, choose the lowest paying career paths. So that goes a long way toward explaining that data, and I think too often we don't ask that question. It leaves us at a disadvantage because, frankly, your income is the springboard for all your wealth-building efforts, right? So it's so important that you look at the income you're earning and also make sure you're earning the most you can at any point in your career.
Mindset is a big factor that feeds into this uneven distribution of women in the workforce. Barrett says the data shows that women are more apprehensive to even apply for jobs they worry they may not be qualified for, while men will move forward and apply anyways. This apprehension extends past the application process and into salary negotiation, yearly raises, title promotions, and greater benefits. She points out that this is common amongst women at all levels who don't want to come off as rude or ungracious.
Now, having been in management now for over a dozen years, I am the hiring manager now. I know how this works. There's a budget range. A lot of times, particularly for mid and senior level jobs, when you make an offer to a candidate, you expect them to come back and counter and ask for more. It is actually expected, but it's not something, again, that we talk about. And I think we should. And there is nothing wrong with asking for more. I mean, be realistic about it. Do your research. See what the market value is out there. Look at what you were earning before. But don't let your emotions or any guilt or any anxiety around it keep you from asking for more because you'll really miss out, right? Even if you make $5,000 less a year, there's research that shows over the course of your career, that $5,000 gap, toward the beginning of your career can add up to $1 million or more in lost earnings over the entire course of your career because your raises are based on it. Often your next job is based on it, even if it's outside the company. Even if you're not asked what you're making now, in your mind, you're thinking about what you were making in your past job. So it can have such an exponential effect.
Money isn't everything, but it does offer opportunity, flexibility, and stability in life. Make sure you're aware of where your money is going each month, and don't forget to look at the larger financial picture. To find out more about our guest, Jennifer Barrett, visit viewpointsradio.org. Also, check out her book, Think Like a Breadwinner, available now online and in bookstores. For more behind the scenes, search Viewpoints Radio on Twitter and Facebook. This segment was written and produced by Amira Zaveri. Studio production by Jason Dickey. I'm Marty Peterson. Coming up next week.
I think it's universally true across various industries, be it restaurants, be it retailers, be it households. People don't know how much they're wasting.
In the U.S., nearly 40% of food produced ends up in the trash. Then,
it's going 17,000, roughly 500 miles per hour. And as soon as it hits the atmosphere, everything starts to heat up.
Commemorating 40 years since the birth of the NASA Space Shuttle. I'm Marty Peterson.
and I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.
And that's Viewpoints for this week. Viewpoints is a production of MediaTrax Communications. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more about upcoming shows and find a library of past programs on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and more information about our guests at viewpointsradio.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Viewpoints.